Hi everyone, today I'll be exploring the controversial question Australia doesn't need a specific Indigenous voice to Parliament. This issue has sparked significant national debate, particularly in the lead up to the 2023 referendum. It asks us to consider whether a constitutionally enshrined advisory body is necessary or whether existing democratic structures are significant for representing Indigenous Australians. I'll first present the arguments in favour of the statement. That is, reasons why some people believe Australia does not need a voice to Parliament. Then I'll present the opposing arguments, reasons why many people believe the voice is necessary. Finally, I'll reflect on the key challenge of addressing this issue. One argument is that Australia already recognises all citizens equally under the law. Some argue that creating a constitutionally enshrined voice risks dividing Australians along racial lines, giving one group special privileges. This perspective sees equality as one person, one vote, without formal distinctions in governance structures. Indigenous Australians can already participate in Parliament as elected representatives. For example, there have been Indigenous MPs and senators such as Linda Burney and Pat Dobson. Supporters of this view argue that additional advisory bodies are unnecessary duplications, as Indigenous issues can be addressed through existing parliamentary committees and advisory councils. Critics argue that the voice lacked clear structure, powers, and accountability. Without detailed policy frameworks, some voters worried about creating an institution with undefined influence. They believe reforms should focus on practical measures like health, education, and employment incentives rather than constitutional changes. My first no argument is closing the gap. Indigenous Australians experience significant disparities in life expectancy, health, education, and incarceration rates. Previous government programs have repeatedly failed to close these gaps. A voice to Parliament was designed to provide Indigenous Australians with a formal mechanism to advise on policies that directly affect their lives, making programs more effective and culturally appropriate. The following figure, 1.3, is a graph from the Australian government displaying the life expectancy of female and male non-Indigenous Australians versus female and male Indigenous Australians for their life expectancies. The voice was a central request in the Uluru Statement from the Heart in 2017, which called for the Voice Treaty and truth. Supporters argue that establishing the voice would not only be practical, giving Indigenous Australians a say in laws that affect them, but also deeply symbolic. Constructional recognition would formally acknowledge Indigenous people as the First Nations of Australia. Something missing from the current constitution, this recognition is seen as an important step in healing historical wounds and moving towards genuine reconciliation. For many Australians, the voice represented an opportunity to build unity and trust between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, creating a foundation for stronger national identity. Advisory bodies such as ATSIC, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission, existed but were disbanded by governments. A constitutionally enshrined voice would be more secure and less vulnerable to political shifts. By giving Indigenous people a permanent platform, the hope is that policies will be more consistent and not erased with each change in government. To reflect, The biggest challenge in addressing this issue lies in balancing equality with recognition of difference. On one hand, some Australians fear that the voice could undermine equal citizenship by creating a separate institution for one group. On the other, ignoring historical disadvantages and structural barriers, risking continual cycles of inequality. This debate highlights broader questions. What does equality mean? Is it simply treating everyone with the same or ensuring that all groups have a genuine chance to thrive? Regardless of one's position on the referendum, it is clear that improving outcomes for Indigenous Australians remains an urgent national priority. The question is how best to achieve it, through constructional change or through other political and social reforms. In summary, I've presented arguments both in favour and against the statement. Australia doesn't need a specific Indigenous voice to Parliament. The yes side emphasises equality under the law, existing democratic representation, and concerns about lack of detail. The no side highlights the need to close persistent gaps, honour Indigenous requests for recognition, and ensure lasting influence in the policy making. The key challenge is finding a balance between fairness and for all Australians and recognition of Indigenous people's unique place in the country. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for your patience. I've also attached in my video my APA 7 referencing. Thank you so much for listening.